Welcome to the Deep Dive. Here, we take complex, real-world stories, unpack them, and really aim to pull out the insights you need to understand what's actually going on beneath the surface.
Hmm.
Today, we're diving into a story that's not just complex, it's genuinely extraordinary. It goes way beyond what you might, normally expect from the life of a cybersecurity expert.
It really, really does. We're taking a deep dive into the, remarkable journey of Alberto Daniel Hill.
Right.
Now, you might recognize the name. He's become quite a prominent voice in the cybersecurity world, known for his sharp analysis.
Right.
But his personal story, his odyssey, it's shaped by just profound adversity, including, and this is almost hard to believe, being the very first person in Uruguay ever put in prison for a computer-related crime.
The first one. Wow.
Yeah, and it's a crime he absolutely insists he didn't commit, vehemently denies it.
And that's what's so gripping here, isn't it? How that incredibly personal saga, that really traumatic experience somehow became the catalyst for something, well, much bigger. What we're looking at today is almost like a blueprint, a real-world example of how a personal crisis can actually morph into a global mission. It's like a masterclass in using digital platforms for really powerful advocacy.
Yeah, and crucially, how to build this almost unique kind of trust online in a space that's often, let's face it, pretty starved of it.
Exactly. This isn't just about, relaying information. It's about creating an environment for raw, completely unfiltered content. The kind that doesn't just inform you, but genuinely educates, empowers.
It really is. It's about hearing directly from people who haven't just lived through these things, but are also willing to be radically transparent about them. That direct, authentic voice, that's what makes this so different.
Precisely. That unvarnished truth, taking an individual injustice and somehow turning it into this collective force for change, it really demonstrates how a personal, crucible can just bloom into a global movement from isolation to real influence.
Yeah.
So, our mission today is to carefully trace how Alberto Daniel Hill did that, especially after navigating such deep trauma, both personal and, well, professional.
Yes, and the big question really is, how did he not just find his voice again, but actually build this unique platform using social media, specifically Twitter, which is now X, of course.
Right, those live audio features.
Exactly. He really leaned into those Twitter spaces, not just to tell his own, harrowing story, but to build this entirely new kind of community engagement. And what's really remarkable is how those spontaneous live chats became the source, the actual wellspring, for his daily podcast, Cybermidnight Club.
That spontaneous, unrehearsed stuff is the absolute backbone of his advocacy, isn't it? This is a story of immense resilience, yeah, but also of strategically using digital tools and maybe most importantly, the undeniable power of just authentic storytelling. And for you, listening, we hope this offers more than just a captivating story. It's a real-world example of how even the deepest personal crises can pivot, can become these global missions. It shows the potential, really, of digital platforms to drive meaningful systemic change.
Okay, so to really get the depth of that transformation, we need to go back a bit. Before late 2014, to Alberto's early career.
Right.
Even back then, he was deeply involved in IT and cybersecurity. It wasn't just a hobby, it was his professional life.
Oh, absolutely. He had a really significant role in Uruguay, almost pioneering, you could say. I mean,
Yeah.
consider this. He was actually the country's very first IT expert assigned to work on a cybercrime case.
The first, yeah.
The first, yeah. That's
Yeah.
a huge thing. It puts him right at the forefront of a field that was just starting out in his country. He was basically charting unknown waters.
Wow. The first one. What prompted that? Why him specifically at that moment?
Well, it was tied directly to new cybercrime laws. They were being rolled out in Uruguay around that time.
Ah,
So his expertise, his specialized knowledge, was suddenly critical to help navigate this brand new legal territory. It put him right at the very beginning of digital forensics in Uruguay. He was, in effect, setting precedents, shaping how these crimes would even be investigated there.
and what did that work actually, involve? Because the details here are so important for understanding what he went through later. This wasn't just reading reports, was it?
No, not at all. Imagine the burden of this. His task was to sift through and literally count over 3,000 images. And these weren't just any images. They were profoundly disturbing child exploitation material.
Oh, God. 3,000.
An unimaginable amount for anyone to have to process, let alone as, part of your daily job. It's almost hard to even wrap your head around the scale and the nature of that.
It's harrowing just thinking about it. And he described it himself in really stark terms. He said it literally mentally twisted his perception of humanity. Yeah. He explicitly said it poisoned his worldview. This wasn't just a job, or some academic task. It was this sustained assault on his mind, a direct confrontation with the absolute darkest side of human behavior.
I just can't even begin to fathom the psychological toll, the sheer emotional weight of dealing with that day after day. He wasn't just observing the dark web from afar.
Yeah.
He was immersed in it, sifting through it, trying to help bring justice, sure, but the personal cost, it must have been immense. It's the kind of thing that leaves deep scars, fundamentally changes how you see the world.
It certainly did. And completely understandably, this led to severe burnout. By December 2014, just a few years into this incredibly demanding pioneering work, he had to step away.
Had to leave that specific role.
Yeah, from that specific line of digital forensic work entirely, he had to put his own mental health first, which really tells you something about the intensity, the damaging nature of what he was doing.
Exactly. But what's really insightful about this period, looking back now, is how it kind of unknowingly laid this incredibly complex foundation for him. It gave him profound resilience, no doubt, but also this deep vulnerability that would be tested even more tragically down the line. He gained this firsthand, gut-level knowledge of the internet's most dangerous places. He understood the psychological cost of that digital underworld.
Yeah, it wasn't academic for him.
Not at all. It was etched into him, a lived experience that would profoundly shape everything that came next.
So, with that heavy foundation sort of in place, we move forward just a few years, and then bam, September 2017, Operation Bitcoin just explodes onto the scene, and it irrevocably changes the entire course of Alberto's life.
Yeah, that infamous arrest. He becomes the first person in Uruguay imprisoned for a computer crime. And it's just crucial to keep saying this, a crime he has always, always insisted he did not commit.
Right.
That's the core paradox here, the deep sense of injustice right at the heart of his initial ordeal.
And the conditions of that imprisonment. 8 months in preventative prison. He describes it as so traumatic, it actually led to him being in the 3-hour coma.
A coma? How?
From an overdose of Xanax. He was taking it for severe anxiety after apparently being stalked by some stranger who was trying to pressure him, coerce him into hacking a bank.
Oh my God, inside prison?
Yeah. It's just an unimaginable level of stress, physical and psychological. Especially when you layer it on top of that earlier trauma from the horrific content he worked on. It was utterly devastating. It completely dismantled his life as he knew it.
And then there's the public aspect, the media reaction. They didn't just report the arrest, which, would have been bad enough. It was an onslaught.
Oh, the media in Uruguay, according to Alberto, just completely destroyed him, destroyed his image. They painted him as, and I'm quoting him here, the worst cyber criminal, cyber terrorist on earth.
Just like that. Wow.
Yeah, a total public vilification,
Yeah.
a character assassination on a national scale. His reputation was just left in shreds.
It was even worse than that, though, wasn't it? Because he says the police press releases basically doxed him.
Right.
And for anyone listening who doesn't know that term, doxing means publishing someone's private, identifying information online, usually with malicious intent.
And in his case, it was devastatingly thorough. The Ministry of Interior's press release. It published his full name, his face, his home address.
No.
Yes. And incredibly, even high-resolution images of his credit cards with the numbers visible.
You're kidding. They published his credit card numbers.
Visible numbers. Every intimate detail of his identity, his financial info, just put out there for the public. Overnight, he went from being this respected pioneer in digital forensics to a complete outcast in his own country.
The mental weight of that public humiliation, on top of the work trauma, the imprisonment, the anxiety,
Right.
It's almost impossible to grasp. Losing your freedom, your reputation, your entire identity in the eyes of your community.
Yeah, the total dismantling of his life. And then when he's finally released, his reputation is shot. He's also lost billions in cryptocurrency assets because he was locked up, couldn't access them.
Millions? How much are we talking?
Assets that he estimates, with current Bitcoin prices, could be worth around $10 million.
$10 million. Wow.
That's a staggering financial loss on top of everything else. Just an immense crushing blow to his future, compounding all the personal devastation.
Absolutely. And then on top of all that, the traditional media, the very outlets who'd basically convicted him in public already, they wouldn't give him a voice.
Right. Just shut him down.
refused to cover his side of the story, denied him any platform at all for vindication.
So how does someone even start to rebuild from that? I mean, when every local door seems just slammed shut, when the entire system seems stacked against you and you're left with nothing but public scorn and personal ruin.
And that right there, that was the absolute turning point for Alberto, when those traditional local paths for truth, for vindication were just closed off. Where do you turn?
Well, the internet, right. That's where you turn. It literally became his lifeline.
Exactly. His cell phone, that simple little device, it became his most valuable asset, as he puts it, the moment he got out of prison. That phone was his immediate link to the outside world, and very quickly it became his link to a global audience. And that was the strategic light bulb moment. He thought, okay, maybe my country, only 3 million people, maybe they won't listen, or they've already decided. The media narrative was set.
Right. They weren't going to change their minds easily.
No, but he realized something really profound. There are, what, almost 8 billion people out there? Maybe some of them might be willing to listen to my story.
Wow. That wasn't just a passing thought then. It was a whole strategic reframing of his path forward.
Totally. It redefined everything about how he would approach his situation, shifting his focus from trying to get local vindication, which seemed impossible, to global advocacy.
So the very first step towards finding that voice again was through social media, specifically Twitter, or X now. What did that look like at the beginning? Was it all strategy from day one or something else?
Well, initially it was incredibly raw, just a completely unfiltered outpouring. He used it to express, and he says this himself very candidly, all those feelings of hate and anger.
Yeah.
All the stuff that had built up from the immense trauma and the injustice he felt he'd faced. It was an understandable response, almost primal.
Totally understandable. Anger at the system, right? At the perceived injustice, at the people involved. He was grappling with these really strong negative emotions, anger, maybe even a desire for revenge. It must have felt like a necessary release valve after being so completely silenced and attacked for so long.
It absolutely was a vital coping mechanism, a way to let off the immense pressure of being wrongly accused, locked up, publicly trashed. But he was also aware even then that those feelings, while totally natural, weren't going to help him truly recover or, move forward constructively.
That takes incredible self-awareness, though, in that kind of situation, to recognize the toxicity of just staying angry and to actively try to move past it.
It really does. He openly acknowledges that this struggle, wrestling with those negative emotions, it lasted for years, slowly fading as he processed everything. It was a long, difficult process. Accepting what happened, learning the hard lessons, moving on without constantly replaying the pain, but still using the experience to fuel his purpose.
When did things really start to shift for him internally? When did he move from just, raw emotion to a more strategic approach, from just venting to really advocating?
Probably not until early 2022. That's when his legal case finally closed.
Okay. The closure.
Yeah, that closure allowed him to genuinely process and accept the huge losses, financial, personal, without the constant background noise, the internal pain of ongoing legal fights. Remember, before this, he tried everything locally, reaching out to top journalists, major TV shows in Uruguay. He was actively trying to get his side heard, to counter that official story.
But they wouldn't touch it, even if they thought it was interesting. Why was that? What was the reason given?
Exactly. None of those efforts went anywhere. He was just effectively silenced by the traditional media. One journalist even interviewed him for 2 hours at his home, listened to the whole thing, but the story never published.
Why not?
Reportedly, it was because the Ministry of Interior refused to comment on his statements, essentially just stonewalling any attempt at a counter-narrative. So all he had left was his phone and Twitter's global stage.
That forced pivot then, from raw emotion to this deliberate strategic advocacy, that's incredible growth. Realizing the digital world offered this huge possibility when his local world had just completely shut him down. It was a powerful shift, turning a desperate outlet into a calculated strategy for global reach, for vindication, and ultimately for real impact. And this brings us to the next really crucial phase. He didn't just stick with short tweets, did he? He went live. How did Cybermidnight Club, the podcast forerunner, actually get started?
Well, what's truly amazing here is just how organically it all began. It wasn't some, big pre-planned media launch, no slick strategy document, no big marketing push from day one. It really just evolved from genuine interaction.
Not at all. It started almost by accident, really. Alberto kicked off an initial test space on Twitter. And the topic was, maybe surprisingly, romance scams.
Romance scams. Okay.
A common online danger, sure. But one he openly admits he intended to approach with a bit of sarcasm, maybe even cynicism, perhaps just as a way to, blow off some steam.
Okay, but that's not quite how it played out, was it? The tone shifted pretty fast.
Precisely. What happened next was completely unexpected, and ultimately it was transformative for him. He calls it an unplanned convergence. Victims of these romance scams, former criminals who had actually run these scams, and experts in various cybersecurity fields, they just started showing up in the space, drawn in by this discussion. And the conversation deepened almost immediately. It pivoted from potential sarcasm to this really serious, deeply empathetic discussion. It became this unique space filled with organic depth and raw honesty. And that unexpected shift revealed something really fundamental, didn't it?
It did. It showed there was this huge unmet need for raw, direct, unscripted conversations about these really sensitive, often taboo topics in cybersecurity. People were hungry for authentic experiences, real insights, not just sanitized reports or dry academic talks. They wanted to hear from the people who had actually lived it.
And the environment, the atmosphere for that candid exchange was largely fostered by Alberto's own approach, which he calls radical transparency. That sounds incredibly brave, maybe even risky given his history. What did that actually mean for him in practice? How did he do it?
It's definitely brave and, yeah, involves a calculated risk. For him, radical transparency isn't just some buzzword. It's a deliberate, tactical core of his whole communication strategy. He's willing to share intensely personal details, past mistakes, his own vulnerabilities, like openly admitting he's been hacked himself, and even admitting to hacking himself once just out of sheer curiosity.
Okay, wait. Hacking himself. What does that mean specifically? Give us an example of that kind of extreme openness.
Well, he'd openly admit things like, yeah, I've been hacked. But the hacking himself example is pretty striking. He explained he once deliberately infected his own computer with a remote access Trojan, RAT.
Okay, so malware that gives someone remote control.
Exactly, often hidden control. He did this not for anything bad, but purely to deeply understand how that kind of malware works, how it affects a system, what it can really do. This wasn't for shock value, though. His reason is really clear. He says, I share a lot of things about me in my life. I do it for a purpose. I want people to actually believe and show that I am genuine.
That kind of profound honesty must be incredibly disarming. It just cuts right through any skepticism. And crucially, it invites other people to be just as open, right? Creating that safe space for vulnerable sharing, which is absolutely key for building the kind of community he wanted.
And he combines that with real humility, doesn't he?
Yes, profound humility. He often says something along the lines of, whoever claims he's an expert, that he can never be hacked. Well, my respects, but I'm not that kind of person. He doesn't try to seem infallible or above it all. In fact, he uses his own past, his own vulnerabilities, to build bridges, showing that even those who once caused harm can become powerful voices for defense.
That's genuinely refreshing. An expert admitting they're not perfect, especially in cybersecurity where the stakes feel so high.
It really is. That honesty coming from someone who was wrongly painted as this master cybercriminal, it builds this extraordinary level of trust with an audience that might, otherwise have every reason to be doubtful. He openly admits he worked incredibly hard to protect businesses and consumers from the very kind of attacker he used to be.
He points to a real transformation, doesn't he? A genuine, deep shift in his perspective. And interestingly, he says the true realization, the moment he really understood the damage he'd done as a black hat, it didn't come when he got caught or went to prison.
No. When then?
He states it clearly. Not until I started to turn my life around and started to interact with victims that I started to understand the damage that I had done.
Wow. So talking directly to victims, that was the turning point. That was his epiphany moment, when it truly clicked for him, fundamentally changing how he saw cybercrime.
Exactly. That direct human interaction fundamentally changed his understanding of the real-world impact. The shattered lives, the financial ruin, the emotional devastation. That's what fuels his motivation now for this radical transparency and his tireless advocacy for victims. He believes, the standard awareness campaigns often aren't enough to really make a difference.
Why does he think they fall short?
He thinks they often miss the mark because, as he puts it, criminals are simply better at committing crime than the common person on the street is at protecting themselves against that crime. That's a pretty sobering thought, isn't it? But it comes from painful firsthand experience.
It is. And his most urgent plea The message he hammers home, drawn straight from his own past and transformation, is for victims to report, report, report. He stresses this constantly with this passion born of deep personal understanding.
Why is he so insistent on reporting? What did he learn from his own past that makes him push this message so hard, almost desperately?
He says powerfully that not reporting or not calling the police on me resulted in me keeping on going because what consequences did I have? None.
Wow.
That's a brutal, self-admitted lesson from his own past. He went unchecked. He kept doing what he was doing because nobody reported him. The system never got a chance to intervene.
So he actively works against the shame, the victim blaming, that often stops people from reporting cybercrimes. He points out that only a tiny fraction, maybe 7%, maybe 14% of cybercrimes actually get reported. And that silence just helps the criminals, right?
It absolutely emboldens them. It allows them to continue without consequences, perpetuating the cycle of abuse. So by providing this platform for raw stories, he's directly fighting that silence, actively working to break the stigma, encouraging a collective, proactive stance against cybercrime, turning individual pain into shared protection.
So it's a calculated risk, this radical openness, but it's for a much bigger purpose. Does this transparency extend beyond just cybersecurity topics? Into his personal life, too? Does his radical transparency apply there?
Yes, absolutely. And he explicitly calls it a calculated risk. He says, I play. Okay, but okay. Always controlling and, first of all, understanding what the risk I'm exposed to and accepting that or not. This isn't just being reckless. It's a deliberate choice based on weighing the potential outcomes.
And this applies personally in some really profound ways.
Very much so. Most notably, perhaps, he met his fiancée online. And she showed incredible trust in him. She actually traveled to meet him without initially telling her family.
Wow. Despite his public profile as the hacker of Uruguay and all the negative press.
Exactly. Despite all of that, given everything he's been through, how he's been portrayed, that's truly remarkable trust on her part. It really highlights the level of faith his authenticity can actually inspire.
That's incredible.
Indeed. And when she did eventually tell her family, their initial shock and concern just underscored the very real-world challenges his past created. But her willingness to take that risk from him, it speaks volumes about the credibility and genuine connection he built online through his transparency. And his anxiety about her safety during that time, his insistence that she shared his details with her family, that further shows it's not just theory for him. It's a deeply lived commitment to building and maintaining trust.
So this vulnerability, combined with his expertise, creates this genuinely unique, trustworthy environment in his spaces. And the calculated risk extends professionally too, right? Yeah. He's sharing old black hat techniques, maybe even some he used himself.
Yeah.
Yes, he knows it's a fine line. Sharing a technique he once used could potentially be misused by others. That seems dangerous. How does he justify that?
He calculates that demonstrating his deep firsthand knowledge of how criminals actually operate builds far more credibility with victims and experts than some, sanitized academic approach ever could. He's effectively saying, look, I know how this works from the inside out because I was there. He believes this detailed, unvarnished insight is absolutely essential.
So he's leveraging the uncomfortable parts of his past, the very experiences that led to his imprisonment, to try and prevent future harm, to arm others with genuine understanding.
Exactly. He makes it clear. Understanding how criminals think and operate, truly grasping their tactics, their motivations, that's the first, most crucial step in effective defense. It's about fighting fire with profound, hard-won knowledge. And this personal vulnerability becomes the foundation for these public discussions, building trust. And that leads directly to how these live Twitter spaces feed his podcast, Cybermidnight Club.
Right. And this is where it gets really unique, doesn't it? This is pulling from, carefully selected sources. No, the podcast content comes directly from those raw, live, unscripted conversations happening in the spaces. It's genuinely a new form of content creation.
Exactly. So what does that mean for you, the listener? What's the core value here for someone tuning in to the deep dive and maybe potentially checking out Cybermidnight Club?
It's authenticity. Pure and simple. Direct insight you just cannot get anywhere else. You're getting unfiltered, often spontaneous exchanges from people who've genuinely been there, who've experienced it themselves. Not just observers or academics reporting from a safe distance, but voices right from the front lines of cybercrime.
Precisely. You're hearing the voices of victims who've suffered profound betrayal, reformed perpetrators who once used deception as their weapon, and proactive advocates who are fighting these threats right now. These are real-time, real-stakes conversations where the people involved are invested not just intellectually but personally. Emotionally.
Unrehearsed revelations,
Yeah.
yeah. That immediacy captures nuances and emotional truths that just get lost in more structured, edited formats. It's like being a fly on the wall during these pivotal, candid moments. You absorb the raw human element behind the technical stuff, which makes the information far more memorable and honestly impactful.
So focusing on the podcast itself, Cyber Midnight Club, how is it actually doing? In terms of reach, engagement, what are the numbers and where can people find this unique deep dive into the cyber underworld?
Well, Cyber Midnight Club launched way back in December 2018, and it's incredibly active. It's updated daily, which is just astounding for a podcast with this kind of depth and commitment.
Daily, an hour-long podcast daily.
Hmm.
That's intense dedication.
Yeah.
Requires a huge amount of content generation and continuous engagement with his audience.
It really is. As of July 8th, 2025, he's put out a staggering 522 episodes in total. And the average episode length, like you said, is about an hour.
And the reach. How many people are tuning in across all those episodes?
It's pretty impressive. It's gathered over 100,000 plays across all platforms combined since it started. On Spotify alone, it's hit 12,941 plays with 7,062 total streams and just over 200 hours of total listening time. Its peak follows on Spotify hits 708.
Okay. What about ratings or general audience feedback, especially since that unfiltered, sometimes uncomfortable approach might not be for everyone?
Well, that's interesting. On Apple Podcasts, it currently has a 1.8 rating, but that's from just 5 reviews, so maybe not a huge sample size.
Right.
However, one reviewer really seemed to get it. They nailed its core strength, accurately capturing what it's about, saying, "The content offers authentic narratives, presenting a perspective that captivates listeners with its genuine and unscripted feel." That really hits on the true differentiator you were talking about earlier.
Indeed. That captures it perfectly. And for listeners who want to experience this firsthand, is it easy to find? Widely available?
Oh, yeah. It's extremely widely distributed. You can find Cyber Midnight Club on Twitter, YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Facebook, Instagram, Medium, IMDb, even Telegram. It's really positioned as this daily true crime podcast by Alberto Daniel Hill, offering those firsthand insights into the dark web and expert analysis of current cybersecurity issues, directly from someone who's lived through so much of it and who continues to grapple with the issues he discusses every day.
The dedication to produce that daily, especially drawing from live, unpredictable spaces, is pretty remarkable. It really is a testament to his commitment and just the compelling nature of the content itself.
Okay, instead of just listing off more episode titles, can you give us a deeper dive into a few specific examples? What kinds of raw conversations from the spaces have really made it into Cyber Midnight Club episodes to illustrate the breadth and the unique, sometimes unsettling perspectives he offers?
Absolutely. Because it's fueled directly by those live spaces, the podcast covers this huge range of urgent, complex, and often, uncomfortable topics, frequently featuring the voices of those directly involved. Okay, let's start with something genuinely chilling. There's an episode that gets into cartel activity and surveillance, specifically one titled Cartel Surveillance FBI Informed Governments Targeted in Mexico City. This one really stopped me in my tracks.
That sounds absolutely terrifying. What was discussed in that space? How did that conversation even happen? It is. The space discussed these chilling allegations of how the Sinaloa cartel, potentially through compromised officials or maybe direct exploitation, allegedly tapped into Mexico City's huge network of surveillance cameras.
Public cameras?
Yeah. Public infrastructure meant for safety, supposedly being weaponized.
Used for what purpose? What was the end goal?
To track and brutally target FBI informants. It's a terrifying example of how sophisticated criminal groups can potentially repurpose public infrastructure for extreme violence and control. It just shatters any sense of trust in public safety systems. The conversation wasn't just, theoretical. It got into the methods and the devastating results. And it doesn't stop there with the cartels either.
No, I can imagine it wouldn't. What other kinds of alarming trends are they talking about with these groups?
They also explore claims, and these are claims, mind you, of cartels potentially developing their own advanced private cellular networks, their own cell networks, seriously.
Yeah. An alarming criminal innovation, right? Creating these parallel communication infrastructures that let them operate with even greater impunity, outside the reach of normal law enforcement tracking. The discussion explores the implications of that, how it makes tracking these groups even tougher. It really makes you rethink the whole foundation of telecommunications security.
Truly disturbing stuff. Okay, what about things that hit closer to home for many listeners, like digital deception, scams? Does the podcast get into those common threats with the same kind of depth and personal insight?
Oh yeah, that's another huge focus. And it's where Alberto's personal experiences and the unvarnished stories from victims really come through. An episode like Decoding Digital Deception, Scams, Cybersecurity, and Safeguards goes deep into the psychology and the technology behind online scams. It's not just about the tech tricks, but how fundamental human trust is systematically broken down piece by these elaborate schemes.
So, not just the tech, but specifically how trust is exploited. That's a really crucial distinction, often missed in general cybersecurity awareness stuff.
Exactly. They discuss how that trust is systematically broken, from the very first contact right through to the final emotional and financial devastation. They also cover evolving tactics, like the truly scary use of AI deepfakes
Oh, the deep fakes.
to create totally convincing fake identities or scenarios,
Yeah.
making it incredibly difficult for victims to tell what's real and what's deception. Imagine being convinced you're talking to a loved one, only for it to be an AI clone.
The use of deepfakes for scams is genuinely frightening territory. It adds this entirely new, really insidious layer of complexity to online deception.
They are. And this ties right back to the romance scams topic that kind of accidentally started his whole Twitter Spaces journey. Guests like Anna Rowe, who went from being a victim to becoming this powerful advocate against digital deception, and Brett Johnson, a reformed ex-cybercriminal, they provide these unfiltered insights.
From both sides of it.
Exactly. Raw, first-hand accounts of the criminal mindset and the step-by-step psychological manipulation tactics used in these elaborate online cons. It makes it abundantly clear how hard it is for anyone to spot these deceptions when skilled scammers are using such sophisticated tools and techniques.
Let's shift to another area where Alberto's own experience really resonates, the justice system. Given his own, harrowing history with legal misinterpretations, I imagine those aspects feature heavily, maybe with a real personal weight to them.
Oh, absolutely. And with very real personal weight, drawn right from his own ordeal. There's a powerful episode titled Reflections on Hacking, Justice, and Cybersecurity in Latin America. It delves into the arrest and ongoing detention of his associate Vladi in Uruguay for alleged activism defacing government websites.
Okay.
The space explored the whole legal maze, the perceived injustices within the system, critical issues with confidentiality of legal files, fundamental questions about how digital evidence was handled, and the problem of potentially disproportionate charges.
And this surely highlighted a bigger systemic issue, right? Beyond just Vladi's case. One that Alberto knows all too well from his own experience.
Crucially, yes. It starkly showed the systemic lack of cybersecurity expertise within many Latin American legal systems. It's a profound flaw that Alberto constantly hammers on, using his own case as Exhibit A. Like in the episode The Injustice of Responsible Disclosure, where his ethical hacking ironically landed him in jail.
Great, because they didn't understand what he'd done.
Exactly. His ethical disclosure of a massive vulnerability was tragically misunderstood by law enforcement simply because they didn't grasp the underlying technology. It's this critical and often dangerous gap between fast-moving technology and slow-to-adapt legal understanding, a recurring theme that echoes through his discussions and just demonstrates the urgent need for judicial reform in this area.
It sounds like these spaces really get into the weeds, bringing in perspectives you don't normally hear. Or maybe perspectives that are sometimes intentionally obscured. They absolutely don't shy away from controversial or cutting-edge topics. Let's talk about the claims made in that explosive episode titled Fianna en Dispositivos, or Revelaciones, Vulnerabilidades de Confianza en Dispositivos Móviles.
Okay, what was so explosive about that one? Sounds like it tackles mobile security at a really deep level.
It features Jonathan Scott. He's a mobile security engineer, apparently an ex-law enforcement contractor, and he made this incredibly controversial claim about having found grave, persistent vulnerabilities in both Apple and Android OS.
Vulnerabilities allowing what exactly? What kind of access are we talking about here? And how significant would that be for, regular users?
Stealthy, nearly undetectable data extraction. He talked about creating tools for companies like Verizon that could bypass existing phone security. And he went further, implying potential collusion between governments and corporations to exploit these very flaws. And here's the more shocking part. He suggests his findings make Pegasus, the infamous zero-click spyware.
Yes, the one used against journalists, dissidents, activists globally. Notorious. He claims his findings make Pegasus look like What?
Like a child's play or a mere toy in comparison.
Whoa, that's an enormous claim. Almost unbelievable. Making Pegasus, a tool already considered top tier, look like a toy. What does zero-click actually mean, again, just for listeners who might not know that specific term?
It means the spyware can infect a phone without the user doing anything. Literally anything. No clicking a bad link, no opening a malicious attachment, no interaction needed at all. It's a silent, invisible attack that gives the attacker total control of the device. That's why it's so terrifyingly effective and hard to spot. And Scott's claim suggests something even worse exists. Perhaps more pervasive, harder to detect, operating right under the surface of our everyday phones and tablets.
Something potentially even more sophisticated, stealthier. Maybe bypassing current detection methods on a massive scale, embedded deeper within the operating systems themselves.
That's the implication. This is the kind of chilling firsthand account you get directly from these unscripted spaces. It challenges everything we think we know about mobile security. Truly chilling, thinking our own devices could be compromised like that without us doing anything at all.
So these raw, unscripted conversations offer perspectives that are often hidden from public view, or maybe just too uncomfortable for mainstream media to really dig into. It sounds like more than just sharing information. It's almost like building a collective defense, a community actively fighting back in some way.
Exactly. And Alberto's hosting style, his profoundly personal story, that open, non-judgmental forum he creates, it's all crucial. It fosters that honesty, that courageous sharing. It allows people to be vulnerable and share things they might otherwise keep hidden. That's why the podcast content ends up being so rich, so impactful, and fundamentally different from your typical cybersecurity chat.
It really is. The collective sharing in these spaces leads to profound insights and ultimately this unique form of collective defense. It's that safe space where people share experiences without fearing judgment and they can figure out protection together. For instance, you hear listeners sharing real-time scam attempts they're facing, and others in the space immediately jump in, identifying red flags, maybe even building a collective checklist of warning signs right there. Former criminals advise on attack patterns. The community amplifies the individual story, turning trauma into a shared shield through mutual support and knowledge.
So his intensely personal story, amplified digitally by this growing community, it ignited this significant ripple effect. It went way beyond just raising awareness. It truly became a force for systemic change in his country.
Exactly. It gained unexpected global reach, too. He talks about connecting with a major figure in Germany through Twitter, which led to his story being broadcast worldwide. It just shows the raw power of these digital platforms, doesn't it? To transcend borders and amplify voices that traditional media might otherwise ignore or even suppress.
But the most incredible ripple effect has to be him advising the Uruguayan Congress. I mean, going right from being a prisoner to becoming an advisor to the very system that wronged him, that's just an astonishing turnaround. Almost unbelievable. How did that even happen? How did he get their ear?
He uses his own case, his whole ordeal, as a living example to highlight fundamental flaws in Uruguay's legal and judicial system regarding cyber issues. His persistent advocacy, using his platform to share his experiences and gather similar stories from others, it just made the need for change undeniable. He states, quite directly, the change was basically triggered by your case.
Wow.
It's a profound shift from being a target to becoming a consultant, directly influencing the system that once imprisoned him. That's a testament to his sheer persistence and, frankly, the undeniable truth embedded in his narrative.
What specific tangible changes came out of this advocacy in Uruguay's cybersecurity infrastructure? Did it really lead to high-level shifts, or was it more like subtle policy nudges?
Oh, significant ones. And right at the top, he recounts the removal or replacement of former directors of cybersecurity at Interpol, the Uruguayan CERT, and even the head of security for the presidency.
Really? Heads rolled at that level.
Yeah. This represents a massive structural shakeup at the highest levels of national cybersecurity. Not just minor tweaks or policy adjustments. This shows a direct institutional response to the problems his case exposed.
That's a huge structural shift, a clear acknowledgement of past shortcomings. What about new infrastructure? Did it lead to new departments or units being created?
Absolutely. There's now a completely new structure, a dedicated cybersecurity unit staffed with trained professionals, equipped to handle the complexities of modern cybercrime with actual competence. And crucially, a new cybercrime prosecutor who is reportedly well aware of Alberto Daniel Hill's case has been appointed.
Someone who understands the context.
Exactly. Reflecting a more competent, more specialized approach to cybercrime within the legal system itself. This means, hopefully, future cases involving responsible disclosure or complex digital evidence might be handled with greater understanding and less potential for these terrible miscarriages of justice.
How did he manage that level of persistence, though? To drive such profound institutional change after everything he went through, after being vilified, imprisoned.
His persistence was just relentless. It was through repeated testimonies to Congress, relentless public advocacy via his spaces, and by presenting real-world case studies from the podcast that highlighted systemic failures in stark human terms. The evidence he presented, backed by that raw testimony, just became undeniable. It created this irresistible push for change, despite any initial resistance from, entrenched institutions. It shows a real, tangible institutional response, a systemic shift addressing the profound issues he exposed. It truly underscores his core belief in digital platforms as tools for amplifying your voice, for driving societal change. And his core message just echoes through it all. Share your story.
Share your story. Because as painful as it might be, he says, it could save just one person. The reward, he argues, isn't necessarily for you when you speak out, but it's for others who might be vulnerable. And that helps combat the shame and the fear that keeps victims silent.
Exactly. He continuously highlights that tiny percentage, that 7% to 14%, who actually report cybercrimes, emphasizing that this silence emboldens criminals, allows the cycle of abuse to continue unchecked, harming countless others. By providing this platform for raw stories, he's actively fighting that silence, breaking the stigma, and encouraging that collective, proactive stance. It's a powerful model for turning deep personal pain into profound public protection.
Alberto Daniel Hill's story is it's extraordinary. It's a true testament to resilience and undoubtedly the transformative power of digital platforms when they're used for genuine connection and, well, fearless advocacy.
Yeah. His personal log into hell, as he sometimes calls those dark times, it really did become a kind of log out to hope for many people. His experiences are now actively shaping a more just, a more secure digital future in Uruguay. And his unwavering voice is inspiring others all over the world to find theirs, to share their truths, and to join that collective defense against increasingly sophisticated cyber threats.
And connecting it back to the bigger picture, his story really makes you think, doesn't it? What does it truly mean to know someone or even to trust information in this incredibly complex, interconnected digital age we live in?
Especially with so much noise, so much intentional deception, so many conflicting narratives flying around now. How do we, as individuals and maybe as society, how do we sift through all that noise to find authenticity, to discern genuine voices and experiences amidst the chaos?
Yeah.
And crucially, how will our collective courage, our willingness to share our own vulnerabilities, our experiences, and to genuinely listen to authentic voices on these platforms, how will that shape online interaction, shape trust, shape our very understanding of truth moving forward?
Particularly as technology continues to just blur the lines between what's real, what's true, and, everything else in the complex, constantly shifting digital world that we all inhabit now. It's a critical question for all of us.